I love PDW type guns. You know, the super small, often pistol caliber weapons. What I don't love is their price. Yes, I know that quality costs, but man, have you ever shot an Uzi Pro or a B&T MP9? They don't provide an experience worth their price. The Flux Defense Raider is my personal favorite, but I'm still looking at sinking close to $1,000 or so into the platform and gun. Keep in mind you're paying all this money for what's essentially a large handgun. Ballistically, you're not getting any advantages like you would with a rifle. You get a big pistol that's more controllable, easier to shoot accurately, and easier to shoot at extended ranges. You're paying $1,000 or more for a big pistol that's still kind of concealable. PDWs are seemingly not for the poors. Or are they? Now I joke, but the Bear Creek Arsenal thinks they can be. Bear Creek Arsenal is kind of known for making incredibly affordable AR-15 rifles and pistols. Some would say they are the cheapest on the market. I'd probably agree. And they also make this thing, the BC-9. The BC-9 is AR-15-ish, but not really. How can I best describe it? It's Bear Creek Arsenal's take on the bufferless AR platform. Saying bufferless is a lot like saying hammerless revolver. We all know there's a hammer, but we just don't see it. There's a recoil spring, and you could call it a buffer, but there is no AR-type buffer and no receiver extension. So the end effect is making a much smaller gun. It cuts a fair bit off the rear of the gun. So they trim the rear, but they also circumcise the front by dialing the barrel back to about 5 inches. Now there are other options, but this is the smallest. So they added a 1913 rail at the end, and ultimately it's a gun that's easily equipped with a brace and easily is stashed inside a bag with said brace, as long as that brace folds. It might be on the bigger side of PDWs, but I think it still qualifies as part of the genre. When I first threw a magazine in, I couldn't help but think it looks like a Tech 9. I'm going to give BCA some free marketing advice. Call this thing the High Tech 9. There's my free advice. Now, where the receiver extension used to sit, we now have this 1913 rail for braces that's basically just part of a chunk of aluminum. The BC-9 isn't a new gun, but it somehow completely escaped me. I'm a big PCC and subgun fan, so I missed out on the release, but have been making it up in the last few weeks. BCA sent me the BC-9 for review, and we've been chewing through some ammo together. So the BC-9 cost less than $500. With that in mind, what did BCA have to do to keep this weapon so cheap? First, they didn't do anything radical. The gun uses the uppers and lowers they're already mass producing. So it's just AR receivers, namely, the lower is a Glock pattern AR receiver from BCA, and the upper is a 9mm with a side charging handle. BCA makes tons of side charging handles, and this is nothing different. This specific model allows you to pick between a left or right side charging handle, not at the same time. You have to pick when you purchase, so you can't swap it from one side to the other. I went with a left side variant with the idea that my support hand can work the charging handle without breaking my firing grip. However, if you want the smallest package, the right side charging handle makes it a lot easier to fold a brace flush to the gun and to shoot the gun with the brace folded, since the charging handle does reciprocate. So to keep this thing cheap, they also just made it a straight blowback design. This is the cheap and easiest way to make a 9mm AR. It works. It has some downsides, which we'll talk about later, but it does work. They did have to modify the bolt to work with the internal recoil spring and the right or left side charging handle, but that's not all that hard. Additionally, the rear 1913 rail is just a chunk of aluminum attached to the rear of the AR-9 receiver. So a great way to keep things cheap is just to not make it fancy. The BC-9 is not fancy. We don't even get a last round bolt hold open device. The gun uses a simple M-block rail with the world's cheapest and longest flash suppressor, which is weird on like a PDW sized gun. It adds about an inch to the gun. I'm ditching the flash suppressor because it's not needed and it just adds length for nothing. So really, the easy way they kept this thing so cheap is that they are already mass producing most of the parts for other guns. Keeping the fancy features to a minimum helps. BCA doesn't include any sights or even a magazine with the gun, something they are very clear about. Hell, it still has an A2 pistol grip, which has to be the cheapest option ever. So this allows them to eke out a PDW-sized AR-9 platform for less than $500, and hey, more power to them. So let's shoot the thing. The BC-9 isn't all that hard to shoot without a brace. It's surprisingly light, and you could hold it a bit like a Tech 9 if you wanted to channel your inner gangster. So I did add a budget-friendly red dot from Korea, and I can't remember what it's named for the life of me. It doesn't look like it's sold anymore anyway. It works, and it has for years. It's kind of when I toss on review guns like this. It's super simple, and it matches the gun well. Additionally, I had a PSA triangle-style brace hanging out, which isn't the cheapest 1913 brace, but it's the coolest, at least for me. One of the nice surprises occurred when I was zeroing the optic to the gun. Now, I didn't exactly think this thing would be inaccurate. I just didn't expect it to be very accurate. This thing is surprisingly accurate. So the BC-9 punched tight little groups at 25 yards, tight enough to be like a 50-cent sized hole when fired from a supported position. Not bad for this kind of gun. So I zeroed at 25 yards, and then I backed up to 50 yards and shot some steel gongs with pretty good, like it was easy. It wasn't really difficult. At 75 yards, I could hit C-zone steel consistently and actually very quickly. I could fire double taps in less than a second and a half and land them both on the target at 75 yards. Did it pass my patented minute of bad guy test? Yep. It went 7 for 7 at 100 yards with all 7 rounds happily hitting the vital zone of a Sage Dynamics thoracic target. You know, when you spend $500 or less on a PDW sized platform, you can expect to make hits. But I just didn't expect this much accuracy. The accuracy is the high point of the gun, followed by reliability. It's a pretty solid shooter. Blowback operated guns tend to be fairly reliable because they are so simple. I fired 350 rounds of some old aluminum cased Independence ammo and another 150 of Monarch steel cased. That's only 500 rounds, but I feel like that's enough for a test. And it ate all of it and didn't stop working. It also worked fine with Glock, Magpul, KCI, and ETS magazines. So I do think the gun's reliable, and I know 500 rounds doesn't seem like a lot, and I do want to start shooting more rounds through these guns when I test them, but at the moment, it's not always economically viable for me to do so. I think 500 rounds from a gun that costs less than $500 without a hitch is pretty reliable, so I'm gonna peg it high on the reliability meter. So what are the downsides to the BC-9? So let's start our shooting experience downsides from the kind of annoying to the really annoying. First, the blowback recoil is not going to impress you. It's no worse than any other AR-9, but if you've never shot an AR-9, you might be surprised at the blowback operated recoil. It's a violent impulse, and it kind of feels like a 5.56 rifle, which already isn't much, but it's more than you expect from a 9mm gun. My build drills with this gun were like 1.7 seconds, and you can blame me as a shooter, but with my radial delayed CMMG Banshee, I could get that down to like 1.5 seconds, 1.55 seconds at best. Next, I'm mildly annoyed with the lack of a last round bolt hold open device. Other companies have figured it out for Glock magazines, and I think BCA can do it. You can still reload the gun fast enough, I guess, but it added about 2 seconds to my reload, and it's just so much easier to slap that bolt release than it is to work that handle. If you watch some of my video closely, I'll try to put it here if I can find it. I punched myself in the face one time when my hand slipped off the charging handle, which isn't the gun's fault, it's because I'm an idiot, but it is amusing. The charging handle is also reciprocating, so watch your hand placement so it doesn't get, slapped and you cause a malfunction with the gun. With the charging handle on the left side, it's also harder to work that optic I have on there, because that optic has a nut hanging off the side, so it's just waiting for me to skin my knuckles. Luckily, there are better optic options for this gun, and it's really kind of a weird mix that creates the problem. So the biggest downside of the shooting experience is trigger slap. If you own a Mac or you've ever shot a Mac, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So that violent blowback action resets the trigger with so much force that it makes the trigger fly forward and slap my precious little trigger finger. It's kind of annoying. It's actually really irritating when you're shooting a few hundred rounds in a day. So be prepared for that. So let's talk about the BC-9 as a PDW. So it's a fair bit bigger than a lot of the PDWs. It's way bigger than the Flux Raider. It's bigger than the BNT MP9. It's bigger than the Uzi Pro and most other PDW-ish size platforms. Still, it can be concealable in a backpack, but I would remove that spiral flash hider. It's just kind of useless and long. I'd really rather just BCA knock $5 off the price and remove the flash hider. It's not needed, and you can just toss a thread protector on there and call it a day. You definitely need a folding brace for sure if you want to get that PDW experience, and I would use a smaller red dot. I would probably use a pistol-sized optic, preferably like an enclosed emitter on a riser. Gideon Optics makes the Mediator with a riser, and I might snag one for the BC-9. It'll keep things affordable and capable. With that in mind, it's never going to readily fit in a small sling bag. You'll need at least a small backpack to make it work. I use a Vertz backpack. It's just kind of the average backpack. Now, if you really wanted to, you could separate the upper and lower, and that makes the weapon easier to hide but harder to deploy, especially with that recoil spring, which, let's say you separate the uppers and that falls out. Now you're going to find that, install it, and then put the gun together. It just doesn't seem like a great idea. My advice for those seeking to use the BC-9 as a PDW is to keep things small, light, and simple. I would probably keep like a 33 round happy stick on board, but if you could load a 17 round or a 21 round or something like that in the gun, it does go in the pack a lot easier with a lot more room. Also, the small red dot would make a big difference and make a lot easier to draw from the backpack, if that makes sense. I wouldn't get caught up in trying to add a ton of accessories. Keep it limited to exactly what you need. Now, overall, I have a lot of complaints about the gun, obviously, but I was impressed by the BC-9. This is like a $450-ish, $470-ish gun, and I kind of wish I'd heard of it sooner. I didn't expect a lot from a sub $500 gun, so I was impressed. At this price point, you're kind of just hoping it's going to be reliable. And it is reliable, at least for the 500 rounds I put through it of substandard ammunition. In reality, it was also accurate, which I like. It's lightweight, it's kind of fun to shoot, and it even kind of looks cool with the right brace. Even if you don't want a PDW and you kind of just want a cheap, fun, like sub-gun stylish thing, this is perfect. It's cheaper than the Scorpion, it's cheaper than the MPX. As far as I know, it might be the cheapest micro-sized PDW size style gun out there. If there is a cheaper one, let me know below. So it's a little big for a true PDW, but if you want something that won't cost an arm and a leg, then your options are limited. The BC-9 might fit that role for you, or at the very least give you a fun Tech 9 wannabe. So thanks for watching. I hope everyone has a great day, and let me know what you think below.